But there is another, darker side to the history of the RAF. During the 1920s and 30s, the Air Force saw regular active service, not in openly declared wars, but in suppressing rebellions against British colonial rule. RAF squadrons were ordered to bomb and machine gun tribal villages, to crush revolt and hold together the far-flung borders of the empire. Some of the first RAF bombing raids in the 1920s were on the town of Rowan Duz in northern Iraq. After the end of the First World War, the Kurdish tribespeople in the area started a guerrilla war against British rule. The area was inaccessible to ground troops, so RAF aircraft were ordered to put down the rebellion by bombing. To find out more about this RAF bombing in Kurdistan, we crossed illegally into Iraq with the Kurdish rebels. This part of Kurdistan was recently the scene of heavy fighting between the Kurds and the Iraqi army. To escape the war, hundreds of thousands of refugees left the area. To date, only a few have returned. In spite of this disruption, we found some people still living in the region who remember the British bombing 70 years ago.
روژه وقتی پازده تیاره لو کرکیدات نخوار والله پازده او دهاتن حتی نیان دهاتاسون راسی دائره استا اذا لیو ببهر دهاتن گرم هر پازده خو خاریه کن اگرانو لکرشی آوابون پازده یدهاتن بشرف او روانزیان امیانا دابا امش لسخانی والله او وقتی 12 و 13 سالیه بوم زیتر نابوم لسه خانیه دوتا خانی طبقه ما بابت زنبیزار بوم شرن دقره کرد دقه تیاره
والله قنبارك دهات تيار دهات قنباريان ليرة عدان لكاين أخران لدان حالة مكش حبوت سبانا دقر بياني هرتات عندك تونه كرشي عندك أتونه خرندي عندك أتونه أو شكفتينا كل عاش شيخي إيرانا حتى تيار الرويشت الأخير روجي عندك زاسيد زاداتن
لو كان قرين أبو مال ملوي أبو مال تيار هاتم وشيعتنا من هلاتم وشيرا على قوة ما سمي لسجل يمزح خوش يرمو أمنو كبر كعمل شيء قم بريش إلى عديدة أمن نكتم رويشتم مدارو شيء لنا واسينك مشكابو إيلم بلندارو أما أخوار رمي فيك كده
This rare archive film of the RAF in Iraq was discovered only recently. In the 1920s, bomber squadrons were based at makeshift runways near the rebel Kurdish areas.
We used to start flying at 7 o'clock in the morning, and quite often one would get a signal stating that a certain Kurdish village had to be bombed. We used to fly in pairs because with little or no radio telephony, we had to keep in touch. Otherwise, if one of us went down, no one would know where they'd gone. And we'd fly up to the village, and we would then fly over in turn and drop our bombs. And go down as low as we can to see that our bombs had actually hit the target.
The pilots were ordered to machine gun any Kurds who looked hostile.
You can identify them quite easily, and if they're not villagers carrying on with a normal business and they're carrying arms, then they ought not to be And if they were doing something you could see that they ought not to be doing, then you shot them.
I was in the RAF. I had a job to do. My loyalty was to my commanding officer, who gave me my orders. If the Kurds hadn't learned by our example to behave themselves in a civilized way, then we had to spank their bottoms. And this was done by bombs and guns.
One junior officer involved was Wing Commander Arthur Harris, later famous as head of Wartime Bomber Command. In 1924, he wrote of these operations, "The Arab and Kurd now know what real bombing means, in casualties and damage. Within 45 minutes, a full-sized village can be practically wiped out, and a third of its inhabitants killed or injured by 4 or 5 machines."
قابلة خارق أصلني حال ما هو خوينا شارد هو عندك تونا أو شاخانة عندك تونا بجنو مارو تونا كرش الشيخ سيدي تاه هوارا داتنا تيار روجي سيدات عند قلق زارع
بعثيني خوشيكي خوافوتك أتيلم بخوب مال مدار خوب كيدرس كيف تشد بالبردشي وزنتكو خوش بي ما نقول ولا ما كري كوردا داش موقع.
The RAF was sent to Iraq as a result of the breakup of the Ottoman Empire at the end of the First World War. Britain and France were given mandates to rule Turkey's former territories. France was given control of modern-day Syria and Lebanon, and Britain was given Iraq, Jordan, and Palestine. Not everyone living in the Middle East was content to exchange one empire for another. The Kurds, a people with their own language and culture, pressed for independence. But unfortunately for them, oil had been discovered in large quantities in Kurdish territory around the city of Kirkuk. The British wanted to keep these reserves under their control. They feared that an independent Kurdistan might use its oil wealth to threaten British power in the Middle East. So they joined Kurdistan with 2 other provinces to invent a new country, Iraq. Many Kurds objected to this arrangement. Ahmed Hoxha was a leading figure in the Kurdish independence movement.
ومێدە خەمانە زۆر بەقووەت بوو بەڵام ئەوان بەرامبەر بە ئێمە تەنها نەوتەکەی کەرکووشیان بە عێراق و بە ناوی حکوومەتی عێراقی عەرەبی عێراقەوە تشکیل لە حکوومەتێکی گەورەی شیمال و جەنوبیان کرد ئێمەیان داماڕی لەو حەق و حقوقەی کە خۆیان بە ئێمەیان بەخشی بوو خۆیان و ئێمە زۆر ئەمەلمان هەبوو کە چونکە ئەمانگوو بەریتانیا قسەکەی نهائیە و پەشیمان نابێتەوە کەسی لە مدەی زۆر کەمە پەشیمان بووە.
Led by Sheikh Mahmud, the Kurds rose in rebellion. Just after the end of the Great War, Britain was faced with the huge cost of sending troops to hold together the new state of Iraq. The Kurdish rebellion was a major crisis for the government in London. The minister responsible for Iraq was Winston Churchill. In 1921, he called a Middle East conference in Cairo to discuss the situation. Among those invited was Lawrence of Arabia. The main problem was casualties. After the carnage of the Great War, Churchill was extremely reluctant to risk thousands of British lives for Iraq, a country about which most Britons cared little. The answer to this crisis came from the RAF. The chief of the Air Staff, Sir Hugh Trenchard, persuaded Churchill to adopt a revolutionary scheme. He proposed sending RAF bomber squadrons to crush the rebellion from the air. The bombers would be cheap, and there'd be few British casualties.
Churchill was the Air Minister at that time, and it was a question of whether the country at that time could afford to keep the standing army that we had in Iraq. I think it amounted something like about 13 battalions of infantry, God knows how many battalions of artillery, and the Air Force Trenchard told Churchill that he thought that he could take over the responsibility of running the country and they could bring the army completely out of it and therefore save a lot of money. Because I think at that time there was a great deal of thought in the country that we wanted to get the hell out of it and let the Arabs get on with it.
We were pretty well bankrupt after the First World War, but we had plenty of aircraft and a lot of keen young pilots still keen to fly. So they decided to try, instead of having an occupation force, which means a crowd of troops on the ground, they decided to hand over the whole of the running of Iraq with the RAF.
The Air Ministry in London regarded RAF operations in Kurdistan as an excellent training ground. New weapons were developed for use in the area, amongst them the forerunners of napalm and air-to-ground missiles. The ministry drew up a list of possible weapons: phosphorus bombs, war rockets, metal crow's feet to maim livestock, man-killing shrapnel, liquid fire, and delay-action bombs. Many of these weapons were first put into use by the RAF in Kurdistan.
As soon as they knew we were coming over to bomb, they went up to the hills and sat in their caves. Well, we got to know this, so eventually what they did was to drop delay action bombs, so that they'd have a 24-hour delay on a 112-pound bomb. So the natives, sort of having cleared off out of the village during the bombing, would eventually return and possibly be holding a powwow sitting on the actual bomb when up it went, you see, and took a few with them.
In the bombing, the RAF drew little distinction between civilians and combatants. Bombs dropped on a town could kill innocent civilians as easily as rebel tribesmen.
فقير لقمن دخلنا عزري فقير قرآن ما دخلت بس جيدا سكاندي ليه كذبوا أمر بناكوت من عزرنا هذا من حلاتهم هاتم شو مزقوتي أي والله خالد مية بركت بمنك وبكرة كيف فقير فقير جيرانهم بفقيهم.
Senior RAF officers believed that by destroying villages and creating refugees, pressure would be put on the rebels to make peace. One squadron leader wrote of the tactics. Driven from his village, the tribesman is stripped at a blow of all that makes life tolerable. If, to the deprivation of all the necessities of life, is added exposure to rain and cold, it will be appreciated that air operations conducted in the winter and spring have the maximum in moral and physical effect on Kurdish tribes.
أيوة أنا زبرت أنا برشام أنا زبرت بيلك بيل كان بيل جني بيل عجوز بدل العربي أما رجع متزور كان يبغى رجل دقنا يا هو دقنا نبو نبو غراني بو هذا نبو.
In spite of the hardships involved, the Kurds continued their rebellion. The city of Suleymaniye, recently one of the centers of the Kurdish uprising against Saddam Hussein, was also the headquarters of Sheikh Mahmoud's rebellion in the 1920s. The British were increasingly frustrated by Mahmoud's success. This Air Ministry memo details the situation. Conditions in the Suleymaniye area remain unsatisfactory. Sheikh Mahmoud persists in his disobedience of government orders. The people of Suleymaniye have been notified that, as a result of the above, Suleymaniye will be bombed. Aircraft were then sent to drop leaflets over the city, warning the population that the RAF was about to bomb it. But with no experience of air raids, few people took any notice.
كعاني تيارك هاد إما لسستكون من عرب نستبين كسر ما نهرب الريب وردماني كرت أو دماغي توفيق فني زاني خد لهيبون باكي هايش فارسكي كو تحوشكو ڕامان کرد بە کۆڵان و کۆڵان هەتا ئەچینە کنماڵی ئینەوان چی پێرن خەفافەوە بەو کۆڵانان ڕامان کرد کە ڕامان کرد پیاە کەوتە بوو مەیت بوو خاڵ و زاکە وتی ئاوە تەیبە شێخ تەیبی عارف تیان نەوەڕا ئەوەنی ئەم پیرە چین بە وڵاترەوە نەژنێک لە ماڵی ساهین چی پێن حاجێمین تۆرا بوو هاتووە دەرەوە بڕوا خۆڵ بڕێژێ هەتا ئەو ڕەحمانی بە باوەشەوە بوو خۆڵ بڕێژێ کەچی بۆمباکە لێ یا کوژا ئێمە شەر ڕامانە کرد بە پێخاوسی کۆڵان و کۆڵان
پێنج ماڵ بوو هەموو ماڵێک مەیتێکی تیا یەکێ لەوانە ژنی حاجی فەرەجی شاڵی بوو مردبوو ئافرەتێک لەو دیویانەوە بوو من خۆم چوم سەیرم کرد دەموچاوی پارچە پەرچە بوو دەستی ئەمانەی هەموو لێ ببووەوە ئەمانەی هەموو لێ ببووەوە دەستی ئاوا لێ کرد قاچیشی ئەوە لە بنا قرتا بوو چاوەڕێم کرد بە دیارە وەستام هەتا ڕۆحی دەرچوو
شەوە هەر شەو بە زێ خۆمانە کردەوە بە ژوورە شەو ئەچوونە حەمام و شەو ئەچوون نانیانە کردیان خوارد و بە ڕۆژی چیان بۆ نەیەکا لە ترسە هەر بە شەو ئیشیانە کرد لە باڵۆ نەترسی تیارە.
Like most of the population, Sheikh Fatala was staying in Suleymania at night. One morning, he was surprised by a dawn air raid.
من کە هاتمە دەرەوە کتیان بۆمبەردومانە گەیشتمە بە دەرگای خۆمان وەختێکم زانی تارێک لە ئاسی ئێستای مەزاخانەکەوە هات بۆ کۆڵانی ماڵی مفتی بەس ئاسمانە تارەکە ئاوا ئەهات ماڵی عیزەبەجیش لەوێ هەیە هیچی من چۆن دانیشتم ئاوا تارەکە ئاوا هات قومبەلەکەی فڕێوە وەکو خۆی تارەکە قومبەلەکەش ئاوا ها بە تیژی هەیوانی ماڵی میرزا تۆفێق بەرز بوو دووقات بوو قومبەلەکە چۆر ناو هەیوانەکەوە کە چۆر ناو هەیوانەکەوە یەشان نەتەقی بوو دار و پەردۆکەی فرێوە فرێیە ئەو داری خانوو کەوتە پشتی منەوە کەوتە پشتی منەوە ڕێ ئەوەم نەبوو ڕاکەم وەختێکم زانی گڵ هات وای بە سەرمە گەڵاو ئەو وەختە دار و زەل و ئەوانە بوو وای بە سەرما بووم بەژێر ئەوەوە هەتا سەعاتێکی پێچ و تەقریبا قەڵەبەتر تارە نەما کە هاتن هاوارم کردم با بە من ناومەتان لەژێر ئەم گڵا دەرم بێنن کە بە خاکە ناز و پاش خەریک بوون لەگەڵما بەرپشت سمتم کە و ئەمەم شکە ئەمەیە مەوزوعەکە ئاوا پاش لێیاننا گڵەکە ڕاکێشن بەرسمتم کە و ئەو کوڵەتی ئێسخانی کوڵەتم شکاو من ئەمە 69 ساڵە ئاوام.
Bombing of Suleymania achieved its aims. The casualties and destruction to the city forced Sheikh Mahmud into the mountains, and the city was occupied by British troops. Trenchard's vision of the potential of air power had been vindicated, so much so that the colonial secretary in 1925, Leo Amery, wrote of Iraq, "If the writ of King Faisal runs effectively throughout Iraq, it is entirely due to British aeroplanes. If the aeroplanes were removed tomorrow, the whole structure would inevitably fall to pieces." Yet the success could not hide some misgivings at the methods involved. A disturbing report reached Churchill of an incident where British pilots had machine-gunned women and children. In response, Churchill wrote to Trenchard, "To fire willfully on women and children is a disgraceful act. I am surprised you did not order the officers responsible to be tried by court-martial. By doing such things, we put ourselves on the lowest level." In spite of Churchill's intervention, no action was taken. In fact, Trenchard took steps to censor reports before they reached his political masters. The documents proving this censorship were kept hidden by official secrecy for 50 years. In one letter, Trenchard instructed his commander in Iraq not to report tonnage of bombs dropped or casualties caused, as the news that 2 tons of bombs have been dropped on some little village daily might give a wrong sense of proportion at home. In another letter, the Air Council asked for a report to be censored on the grounds that if this report as it stands were to get into the hands of undesirable people, harm might be done not only to the Air Force, but also to His Majesty's government. However operational reports were censored back home, there was no avoiding the disquiet of many of the pilots ordered to carry out the bombing.
My pilot was a flying officer, McNeil. We flew to Barzan and commenced bombing runs and machine gun attack, while McNeil, only having a wireless operator behind him, took practically no action, but just flew around the battlefield looking at it, and then flew off to find out what support or reinforcements there might be farther back. And we flew into the hills there. They were very close, of course. And eventually found a couple of poor Kurds struggling up a mountainside with a donkey.
Gale's pilot, McNeil, fired a burst of machine gun fire at the Kurds.
My reaction was this. I had already spent some years living with the Kurds. At Halabja, I lived right in the town with the Kurds all around me. I used to walk out and leave the doors open and everything else, and they virtually thought they were looking after me. And when McNeil had put his burst down, I was bloody annoyed.
You know, when things get a little bit upset, you do get a bit tight, and it feels good to sort of let go with the gun. It's a feeling, perhaps it comes over you. I've experienced it. It's not something that you want to do. It's just you get carried away, I suppose, a bit, and there you are.
What sort of discussions did you have when you talked about it?
How many? Did you kill anybody, do you think? Did you like it? You didn't? A discussion about the Kurds, because previously you might have been out and had a tea party with them somewhere in one of the villages. They're not unfriendly people.
They were much more jovial when you spoke to them, and to my way of thinking, on a higher plane than the average Iraqi from the plains. It was quite a joy to go up through the mountains and call into the various Kurdish villages built in the side of the hills, where they always supplied you with some tea and fruit, and where you were always very welcome. So that on those grounds alone, we had far more respect for the Kurd than we did for the Iraqi.
They had some very fine principles which they lived by, and we should have been encouraging the Kurds rather than siding with the gutter rats who were the Arabs, and they were gutter rats.
I think there's a lot of feeling, were we doing the right thing in what we were doing, in the operations that were taking place. We were ordered to do it, and it was a job of work. But in view of what everybody knew, did you feel really justified, apart from the time when you were fired on, or perhaps you thought your own life was in danger, and you thought you had to take some action and do something about it? But I never met anybody, really, that enjoyed killing Kurds. I don't feel good about it. I still sort of read and know what's going on, and I don't like it. Not one little bit. I think mostly, what is it, political expediency.
Politicians in Britain saw the experiment with air power in Iraq as an unqualified success. At a time of defense cuts and economic decline, the government regarded bombing as a cheap way of keeping control over the more rebellious frontiers of British rule.